Good afternoon, everybody. I'm reporting for duty.
Good afternoon, sir. Hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Honorable
Recording
member,
in progress.
let me welcome all of you into this meeting. Can we observe a moment of silent prayer or meditation? Thank you very much. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the visual mini-plenary session is deemed to be in the precincts of Parliament and constitute a meeting of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything said in the visual platform is deemed to have been said in the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which might disturb the attention of other members. When recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and please unmute your microphone and where possible, connect your video. Members should use icons at the bottom of the system. We should also desist to make points of order that are unnecessary. And lastly, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a visual meeting, and decisions that needs to be taken can only be taken in the full plenary of the House. With that, honorable members, I would recognize the first speaker, Honorable Groenewald.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, people may ask, why do I come forward with this motion to be discussed? The reasons are various. Firstly, I don't think I need to tell the honorable members the importance of the agricultural sector. Its contribution to the GDP was 140 billion rand. And if we look at the labor market, it was the agricultural sector that have shown an increase in the employment of people of South Africa. For 2021 till March 2023, there was an increase from 834,000 to 880,000 employees in the agricultural sector, working on our farms, feeding and ensure that their families are happy and ensure that there is food on the table. For June this year, it even increased with another 6,000 to 894,000. And if we assume that each and every worker supply and see to his family of an average of 4 people, we're talking about 3.5 to 4 million people that is dependent on the agricultural sector when it comes to provide for your family. But besides that, Honourable Chair, the importance of the agricultural sector is actually applicable to each and every one of us. If you wake up in the morning, whether you make yourself a cup of coffee or tea, if you have breakfast, we must thank the farmers of South Africa, because it is they who is actually putting food on the table. And that is the importance. Now, I'm coming forward with this motion in the sense that even since 1994, when President Mandela was the president of South Africa, he recognized the importance to ensure that we fight the issue of farm murders and in our rural areas. Chairperson, many strategies have been developed. For instance, in 2012, the police came forward with a rural or a strategic rural crime prevention strategy. It was updated in 2018. But there's no use that we have the strategies, but in practice, the murders and the attacks on our farming communities just continue. And the problem is that besides these strategies, for instance, the latest updated version refers that, for instance, drones will be supplied to the farmers to fight the attacks against them. But in practice, no drones were ever supplied to the farming community. Yes, we hear about drones bought by the police services, but they are using them in other operations. And the time has come that we as members of parliament realize the most importance of these situations. And I want to say, on the 1st of September this year, this same month, we had a situation where a subsistence farmer and his wife was brutally assaulted by criminals on their farm. En ek wil vandag vir u sê dat die boere van Suid-Afrika is onder beleg. As ek sê onder beleg, dan beteken dit dat 'n boer kan nie met sy werkers dorp toe gaan of met sy gesin dorp toe gaan en terugkom om dan nie voorbereid te wees dat daar dalk 'n hinderlaag vir hulle gestel is as hulle terugkeer plaas toe nie. Die boere is onder beleg want die regering van die dag lewer slegs 'n lippetaal om te sê dat hulle sorg vir die boere. As ons gaan kyk na produksiekostes, brandstofpryse, salarisse wat verhoog, maar daarby dan 'n addisionele uitgawes wat die boere moet aangaan om vir hulle eie veiligheid te sorg, kos enorme hoeveelheid geld. En daarom sê ek dat ons boere is onder beleg. Die wreedheid waarmee die moorde gepleeg word, nie net op die boere nie, of die boer van die plaas nie, maar ook op sy werkers, is nie gewone misdaad nie. 'n Gewone misdadiger sal nie sy slagoffers martel nie. 'n Gewone misdadiger sal dit wat hy wil hê vat, en dan sal hulle gee pad. En agbare voorsitter, ons as lede van die parlement het 'n verantwoordelikheid om te verseker dat ons ook optree in belang van ons landbou en ons boere. Ons kan nie toelaat dat ons net terugsit en niks doen in terme van dat hulle maar aan hulle eie lot oorgelaat word nie. Daarom hierdie mosie om te sê dat daar 'n komitee saamgestel moet word om 'n behoorlike ondersoek te doen na die plaasaanvalle en plaasmoorde op ons landbousektor en gemeenskap. Hulle hou die ekonomie aan die gang. Hulle sorg dat ek en u kos op die tafel het. En daarom vra ek die agbare lede om hierdie mosie dan wel volgende week te ondersteun, dat ons kan sê die parlement het na vore getree om 'n bydrae te lewer om voedselsekerheid in Suid-Afrika te verseker. Ek dank u.
Thank you very much. Can we allow the next speaker, the Deputy Minister for Police? Over to you, DM.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon to you, honorable ministers in attendance, deputy ministers, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police, who has just been affirmed as the new chairperson following the passing on of Tina Jumat. May her soul continue to rest in peace. Chairperson, Honorable Siavi, congratulations to you and to members of the Portfolio Committee, MECs present, members of Parliament, senior members of SAPS, head of entities, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please receive our revolutionary greetings this afternoon. And allow me to tender Minister Begitele's apology for not being able to be part of this important debate due to other work commitments. Honorable members, whatever our misgivings about the legacy are, may I take this opportunity to tender my condolences to the family of the late Honorable Butelezi's family. Lala ngotolo mntwana kaphinda ngene. Chairperson, one of the greatest political and spiritual leaders of our time, Mahatma Gandhi once said, I quote, "All crime is a kind of disease and should be treated as such," close quote. I wish to outline the message illustrated by this great man as he rightly puts it, that crime has no gender, no class, and crime is a major part of every society and should be aggressively dealt with. Yes, crime affects and touches everyone to some degree, and as the ANC-led government and the South African Police Service in particular, we remain determined to fight all forms of crime from all angles. It is our acknowledged responsibility to protect and safeguard our country and all who live in it. It is with this in mind that we welcome the Freedom Front Plus motion as being debated today. And I must say, Chairperson, I fully agree with Honorable Groenewald that the farming community plays an important role in the economy of South Africa and the well-being of our people. And it is very important that at all material times, we must be the first to be at the defense of our farming community. However, I believe the motion as presented by Honorable Groenewald is misplaced, particularly the reasons advanced and the motivations that he gave. I'll give you an example of why I say this. If you listen to his input, he talks to the cost of farming. That is too expensive without any assistance is very difficult, and therefore any other challenge that is added to that makes it very difficult for them. I think the question, Chair, that need to be answered and need to be debated is how do we assist the farmers to deal with the cost of farming? I think that will have been the appropriate subject matter for discussion, not the reasons that have been advanced and the motion, what it intends to do, because the issues raised are misplaced. Chairperson, unfortunately, the motion brought forward seems to suggest that some quarters of society are more impacted by crime than others. I stand here before you all to say this is simply not true. Crime is crime, and this administration, since 1994, with what he said, Nelson Mandela initiated, will continue to walk on the path outlined by President Nelson Mandela, and President Cyril Ramaphosa have taken the course to a higher level and we have put resources, funds, and personnel to ensure the improvement of safety for all communities, rural or urban, black or white, farmer or farm worker. In the recent past, we have seen an increase in the intake of police that is intended to assist us to be able to respond appropriately. I have therefore found no reasonable justification to the establishment of an ad hoc committee to deal specifically with farm and farm matters. The country is engulfed by the concerning persistence of gender-based violence and femicide to such an extent that the president of the country even dubbed it a second pandemic after COVID-19. But I have not heard calls for any special ad hoc committee to deal with this crime. I can mention many other areas of crime and criminality that are threatening to plunge our country into a crisis, but I have not heard similar calls from the EFF Plus. It makes one wonder why. If anything, honorable members, facts and that farm attacks and farm murders are on the rise in South Africa. They are not on the rise. We also deny the notion that the South African police does not have a handle on such crimes affecting the rural communities. On the contrary, esteemed members of this House, the latest released crime figures between April to June 2023 show that 6,228 people were killed in South Africa. And out of a sample 5,987 of these murders, only 79 murders took place at a farm, plot, small holding, or agricultural land. This is not to suggest that these murder victims were farmers, but rather that the crime took place in small holdings or farming areas. To put farm attacks and farm murders into even greater perspective, from April to June this year, there were 14 murders in the farming community. Out of the 14 people killed in the farming community, 4 were employees or farm workers. 5 were farmers, while 4 were farm dwellers, and 1 was a visitor. The crime statistics also show that law enforcement efforts to improve the safety and security in farm and amongst the rural community is producing positive results. Figures show a drastic decrease in contact crimes in rural communities, with 79 less cases reported compared to the previous year. I must not be misunderstood to be saying a single death doesn't matter. Any death matters. We want 0 death in the country. Aggravated robberies have also decreased by 26 incidents. Declines in sexual offenses, attempted murder, and common assault cases have also been noted in the same period. Ladies and gentlemen, robberies at residential and non-residential properties in farming communities have also declined in all provinces. Figures don't lie. The fact is that rural communities have experienced less violent crimes and other contact crimes compared to the same period last year. The declines are no coincidence. To borrow from Mahatma Gandhi's words, I quoted earlier, all crime is a kind of disease and we are treating it as such. As contained in the ANC manifesto of 2019 review, we committed, among others, to strengthen policing to rid our communities of all forms of crime, drugs, gangsterism, and violence against women and vulnerable groups. And I believe as government, we have stayed true to our commitment. SAPS is doing its bit to rid the disease of crime. Again, facts show improvement in reported cases of crime in most provinces. This decreases in crime in the rural communities stems from a combination of policing strategies in place to enforce the law. They are also a direct product of working better and more coordinated with affected communities through the National Rural Safety Strategy. The 5-year strategy, which is currently in the 3rd year of implementation, ensures that the law enforcement build effective capacity and capability in rural areas. Over and above building new police stations, the SAPS is expanding the footprint of the police and improving.
Your time is up, Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I want to reaffirm that we are on course, and this decline in the rural areas, that is in the farming community, is an indication that yes, crime is in decline in the rural areas, and therefore we don't support this motion, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Honorable Masipa. Over to you, Honorable.
House Chairperson, thank you. I wish to begin by expressing deep concern over the recent and recurrent chants of kill the Boer, kill the farmer by members of the EFF. This irresponsible behavior has left farming community apprehensive across the country's diverse spectrum, especially when viewed within the context of the upsurge in farm attacks. It is unfortunate, Chair, that despite appeals from many South Africans and even the international communities to condemn this despicable behavior, President Cyril Ramaphosa remains silent. Even though the song is still under active consideration by the courts as to whether it is a hate speech or not, the phrase kill the Boer, kill the farmer is not only inappropriate, but also damaging to South Africa's national building project. It is a divisive chant, one that fosters hatred, inflames racial divisions, and threatens the very foundation of our democracy. According to figures from AfriForums and the Transvaal Agricultural Union of South Africa, TLU, there's been an exponential increase in farm-related crimes. Deputy Minister, you have just misled the House. In just 3 months between May and July 2023, we have seen the murder rate surge by 56% in comparison to the first quarter of 2023. These victims are not just numbers. They are entrepreneurs, CEOs, and most importantly, our primary food producers. They are pivotal for our nation's food security, ensuring that South Africa remains the breadbasket of the South African continent. For years, the Democratic Alliance has proactively suggested measures to curb crime and enhance security on farms. However, instead of adopting these measures, the ANC government has instead chosen to bolster the security of Ramaphosa's cabinet ministers. According to the National Treasury, VIP protection costs the country over 1.9 billion rands a year, and it is projected to grow even further, while very little is being done to protect farmers from escalating crimes. ANC, House Chair, we must prioritize reducing crime. The current trend of farm murders is alarming and makes the country's food security and food system unsustainable in the long run. Something has to give. One of my former colleagues at university hinted to me that people in his country fear visiting our beautiful country, South Africa, because of high crime incidents. Based on my work on the Portfolio Committee and after the realization that nothing was being done to assist our farmers, the DA took a decision to escalate the issues of farm matters to the party's highest decision-making body, the Federal Congress. A resolution titled Farm Matters in South Africa, DA requests a judicial commission of inquiry into farm matters, quote unquote, was tabled at the Federal Congress and passed with overwhelming majority. The resolution called on the President of the Republic of South Africa to appoint a commission of inquiry in terms of Section 84F of the Constitution to investigate farm matters in South Africa and to make recommendation to this Parliament to increase rural safety. We have already approached President Cyril Ramaphosa, urging him to establish a commission of inquiry into farm matters and related crimes. The DA is advocating for a commission of inquiry because we believe that it is important to understand the root cause of criminal activities in our farming areas in order to develop a comprehensive response strategy. Despite the urgency of the issue, we haven't had a concrete response from the President except to acknowledge the receipt of our letter. House Chairperson, we must recognize that farm matters don't just emotionally scar the direct victims, they impact our society in its entirety. They sabotage our economy, they deter our tourism, and diminish state revenue. Our farmers often reside in remote areas where they grapple with infrastructure challenges, from unreliable connectivity due to ANC corrupt load shedding to poor road conditions. This makes them more vulnerable. Police response is often delayed, giving criminals an upper hand. Reported cases describe extreme brutality going beyond mere robbery. Such heinous acts demand thorough investigation and the immediate arrest of the perpetrators. The DA welcomes the call for the establishment of an ad hoc committee on crime in farming communities. It is our sincere hope that such a committee will compel the President to establish a commission of inquiry that will chart the way forward for a safer farming communities. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Can we call on the next speaker? The next speaker is EFF.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. It is worrying that, as always, opportunistically, as part of a plan to tarnish the good image of the EFF as the only organization that resonates with thousands and thousands of our people, both the DA and the Freedom Front Plus wants to come here and speak of a kill the Boer, kill the farmer song as a contributor to killings. I wonder, how has it contributed to the killing of 28,000 Black people in our societies? Or it doesn't contribute there. It's worrying, Chair, that we do that. Killings remains a criminal activity, and we treat it as such as the EFF, and we're not going to negotiate such. House Chair, at times debates such as this one forces us to reflect on why we are where we are as a country. We must ask ourselves, why is it even necessary to have a socially and economically powerful minority dictating the discourse on what is important and not in the country? If we do this thoroughly, we will all come to the realization that we are where we are today because of the spectacular failure of the decolonization project in South Africa, if ever there was one. Failed decolonization projects have one thing in common, and that is ascertaining interest of the colonizers in almost all aspects of society, of social and economic life. They also entail freeing the colonizer from his guilty conscience, and apportioning blame to the colonized for the sins of the colonizer. Now, here in this country, we know that the settler colonialism did. We know what the settler colonialism did and how it continues to reinvent itself post the so-called 1994 settlement. Settler colonists continue to have land, to own mines, to control the economy, and are only too happy to have the native majority confined to the periphery of the economic life in this country. This is aided by the state, indirectly run by the settler colonists via pliable natives now in the ruling party. Now, settler colonists who have built up and sustained their wealth over centuries on the back of exploiting Black labor want us to center their needs and delusions into the dealing with landlessness and economic exclusions. The idea that there is white genocide in this country and that there is a targeted campaign at killing white farmers is one of the delusions that settler colonists used to continue centering themselves in the national discourse. We reject we reject, and we must continue to reject this assertion. House Chairperson, let us quickly look into the recently released statistics by the SAPS. Every quarter in this country, almost 7,000 people get killed and almost 11,000 women and children get raped, and a number that far surpasses the number of white people that get killed in farms. But we must put this in context that a death, even of a one person, we don't support that. And here today, because white lives matters more than black lives, we find ourselves having this debate with focus on white lives. Even if we were to use the right wing and racist statistics of AfriForum, there would still be no indication that settler colonist white farmers are targeted in this country. The AfriForum report that Ntate Masipa there misquoted, a report for farm murderers in 2022 indicated that there were 333 attacks and 55 murders on farms in 2002. Now, instead of focusing on crime more historically, we must come here and debate a murder of 55 people per year instead of a murder of 28,000 people per year. Does this mean that only white lives matters? What about the black lives? This is because in white supremacist thinking, white life is more valuable than black life. The alarming rate of women and children who are raped each day in South Africa, as high as they are, they don't call for a concern from the Freedom Front Plus and the DA. As that only white lives matter. Shame on you, Masipa, you come here, a black man, to come and continue this perpetual hate on black people. This is because let me also remind the racists that we as black South Africans constitute more than 80% of the total population, and yet we only own just 10% under South Africa's land, whereas they own more than 90% of South Africa's land. There's a problem of crime in this country that this government, the outgoing government of the ANC, is failing to deal with the problem of crime, and will deal with it in 2024 when you take over as the EFF. And this problem of crime, whose genesis can be squarely located at the dispossession of land from natives by European settler in this country. The government of the day is unable to deal with this problem. And they've allowed themselves to be led by settler colonists in almost every important government decisions. That's why today the DA is celebrating that the EFF, ANC, supported their DA motion to remove our public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane. There are no common interests between the dispossessor and the dispossessed. The majority of farmers into this country are settlers, and the violence some experience is not different from the violence experienced by us when such farms were dispossessed. Settlers are not special, and we will not agree to a parliamentary process that seeks to make them special. We, as the EFF in Parliament, we reject this motion, Chair. We are waiting as the government in waiting come 2024. With that, Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done, leadership.
The next speaker is from IFP. The IFP. Then we proceed to the next speaker from the FF Plus, Honorable Briet.
Thank you, House Chair. On Saturday, 1 December 2010, Ati, Vilna, and their 2-year-old little girl, Willemientjie, were attacked on their farm near Lindley in the Free State. Ati was stabbed 151 times with a knife, a garden fork, and a panga, and was left for dead with a garden fork pierced through his neck. This happened in full view of his wife and daughter. Willemientjie ran to her father. Her feet were covered in his blood, and her bloody footprints were found on the pavement around his body. Willemientjie was shot in the head and thrown in a box. After having witnessed the murders of her husband and daughter, Vilna was shot in the head executioner style. After all of this happened, the attackers took a piece of cardboard and wrote the words, "We have killed them, we are coming back." This is but one example of the brutality associated with farm attacks. Farm attacks and farm murders cannot be regarded as normal crime, and although SAPS have the National Rural Safety Strategy and national policy to fight crime in rural areas, enough is still not being done to combat this. On Tuesday, AfriForum released a report highlighting the low prosecution rates of farm attacks and farm murders, and the findings are shocking. The report analyzed the 1,402 farm attacks and murder incidents recorded by SAPS from 2019 to 2022 and found there were convictions in just 66 cases, which means that more than 95% of these violent crimes remain unsolved. The results also indicate the arrest and conviction rate of both farm murders and attacks are low. The arrest rate for attacks is only 22%. And for murders, it marginally increases to 49%. AfriForum's database also recorded 182 incidents of farm attacks in which at least one person was murdered. That totals 217 victims for the 2019-2022 period, and SAPS recorded 153 of these incidents for the same period. Of these murders, there were only 24 cases that resulted in a guilty verdict. This indicates an overall conviction rate of 32%. Of 167 guilty. While it is expected that convictions will almost always be lower than arrest, the low conviction rate for both murders, as stated above, and attacks that stand at only 16% suggests a serious deficiency within the SAPS and the NPA, and this needs to be investigated. But I conclude. According to conservative statistics from January to August 26 of this year, we have already seen 104 farm attacks and at least 32 murders. Certain institutions put these stats a lot higher. We should not just be asking why prosecution and conviction rates are so low, but why the SAPS are underreporting attacks and murders, and why our farmers and our farm workers are under siege. The establishment of an ad hoc committee is critical to South Africa, and especially for food security. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Swartz from the ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP wishes to thank Honorable Dr. Groenewald for this topic for discussion. Violent crime in the country has reached pandemic levels, and it is the primary role of the state to protect its citizens. In our view, government is failing dismally in this regard. People do not feel safe in their homes, at work, and in other public places, despite what the Deputy Minister says. The ACDP is extremely concerned about the numbers of attacks on farms and smallholders, often very brutal in nature. We condemn these farm attacks and murders in the strongest possible terms, as we do all criminal acts against our citizens. Commercial and emerging farmers play a key role in ensuring food security in the country. Besides the tragic loss of life and injuries to farmers and farm workers, food security is clearly threatened by these ongoing attacks. Government's National Rural Safety Strategy must be reviewed. The government has implemented commendable steps to fight the scourge of gender-based violence in the country, but is in our view not doing enough to protect another very vulnerable sector, and that is the agricultural community. What makes matters worse is the very low arrest and conviction rate, as indicated by the AfriForum report released this Tuesday, which says out of 1,402 farm attacks recorded by the SAPS between 2019 and 2022, there have been convictions in only 66 cases. This is disgraceful. Criminals clearly take advantage of the increased vulnerability of farmers and farm workers as they live in isolated rural areas. Electricity and telephone lines are often cut off before farm attacks, and because there are no cell phone signals, farmers and farm workers are often left to their own. The chance kill the farmer, kill the boer, aggravate an already dire situation. To conclude, the ACDP wishes to thank and honor all the farmers and farm workers who have ensured that we have food on our tables despite these ongoing attacks. We wish to thank all those dedicated police officials, neighborhood and farm watchers that have assisted in protecting farmers and their workers and have arrested some of the suspects in these cases. Baie dankie aan julle almal. Lastly, we call on all South Africans to pray for the protection of farmers and their workers at this time, as well as to pray for the families and friends of those who have been murdered or who are recovering from their injuries. Indeed, we need to pray for all the victims of crime in society. How much longer will we as citizens tolerate these unspeakable acts of violence against our citizens? I thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we now call on the UDM?
Mhlali ngaphambili uMzantsi Afrika njengokubanzi unengxaki yokuba ulwaphulomthetho nokubulawa kwabantu nje ezidolophini, ezilokishini, ezilalini, kwiilali apho sisuka khona kukho kudlwengulwa abantu abadala ngabantwana abangene batya iziyobisi. kwiilali esisuka kuzo kwezinye abakwazi ukulala ebusuku kuba beyazi ukuthi bazawungenelwa ngabantu ekuthiwa ngamaphara kuba urhulumente engakwazi ukulwa nolwaphulomthetho kunye nokubulawa kwabantu. Inyanga kuba nzima ukuhamba apha elokishini, kubulawa abantu abamnyama abangaphezulu kwinani lamafama abulawayo. Singatsho ukuthi ukubhubha kwamafama akuyongxaki efanele ukuthi ijongwe ngurhulumente, kodwa into esingayifuniyo yinye into yoba kuzothiwa eMzantsi Afrika kungekho lwaphulomthetho kukwavula zibhuqe, eli lizwe lilawulwa ngoodonteni ezilokishini, abantu abangenamkhondo kuba kaloku amapolisa oyisakele engenazo nee-resources. Asingeke ke ngosiyivumela ibe ngathi xa kufa okanye kubhubha umntu omnyama loo nto ilungile. Xa kubhubha amafama kufanele kube nendlela eyodwa ezawumiselwa nokujongana nokubulawa kwamafama. Loo nto iyakuthi eMzantsi Afrika kukho ubomi obubalulekileyo kunobunye. Xa kubhubha omnyama akukho ngxaki. Umzekelo, ngelaa xesha bekusenzeka le nto ye-20 za-riots phaa KwaZulu-Natal, more than 300 black people died. Akuzange kubekho sankxwe, akuzange kubekho ne-National Day of Mourning kuba kaloku xa kufe umntu omnyama kufe umntu ongaxabisekanga. Nakwezinye izithiwa kumbe neengxaki zalo Mzantsi Afrika, oyena mntu ubhubhayo apha ngumntu omnyama ukodlula bonke abanye abantu. Bekubhubha abantu abamnyama ngoku bekusenzeka i-taxi violence in the Western Cape, but siye saxelelwa nge-tourist emhlophe enye ibize eMzantsi Afrika, kodwa kwaleli nani labantu ababhubhe i-taxi violence alirekhodwanga accurately. And kuba bemnyama bona abanabuso, abanagama. Kufuneka silungise indlela ekuliwa ngalo ulwaphulomthetho eMzantsi Afrika, siqinise ne-law enforcement agencies including ne-police, si-support esi-communities, inikwe ii-resources ezaneleyo kuba often amapolisa athi noba sizama ufumanisa ukuthi awanazo ii-resources uba kwazi ubaleka emva kwe-crime. Loo nto ithi ke ngoku ndaweni uba kube kubukulwe kuthiwe kuzawusetyenzwa amafama kuphela, engoMzantsi Afrika wabantu abanye, lo nguMzantsi Afrika wethu sonke. Xa sibulawa sonke sihlala sisoyika emakhaya, ifuna ukuthi urhulumente enze into ngaloo nto kulwaphulomthetho kumakhaya nakwii-communities zonke. Kamako.
Nkosi, can we now ask honorable member from Good? Good. The next speaker would be from the ANC, Honorable Peacock. Can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chairperson. The ANC rejects a call for the establishment of an ad hoc committee on farmers and farm workers attack. Our view is that the police are dealing with crime in general. There is no evidence to suggest that there is a crime syndicate to attack farms and farm workers. Crime is a societal challenge that requires our collaborative effort to combat it. The Honorable Minister of Police already spoke to the crime statistics and highlighted that between April and June 2023, the SAPS recorded more than 300,000 community-reported serious crime, of which 79 were recorded at rural stations. As stated, during this period, the SAPS recorded 6,228 murders countrywide. Of this total, 14 murders took place in the farming community. Of these 14 murders, 5 were farmers and 8 were employees and farm dwellers. Farm murders constitute of 0.2% of all murders committed in South Africa. This affects honorable members, not emotions. Based on this fact, I want to state clearly that the Freedom Front Plus has brought an alarmist motion intended to launch their 2024 election campaign. We are not falling for this indigence attempt to abuse the rule of parliament for its own political party use. I want to further state clearly that the African National Congress is not turning a blind eye to farm matters. We are not denying that farmers and farm workers have been murdered, but to so South African also, we are concerned about farm matters as we're concerned about all the matters. The importance of a crime is no longer linked to the victim's race. A loss of life is painful regardless of race. The African National Congress has fought a bitter struggle to end discrimination or privilege on the basis of color. We will never allow this again. Crime affects every person, regardless of the economic sector or a race. Honorable Chairperson, we have a problem with violence crime in South Africa, specifically with murders. Nobody can deny this. It is a great concern not only to the police, but also to Parliament, the ANC, and the government at large. We are talking about
ANC.
We are talking about approximately 70 murders per day committed in South Africa. Of approximately 10 are women and 3 are children. 13% of murder are attributed to arguments and misunderstandings. We must reach a common understanding that the factors impacting on violent crime, and especially murders, must be addressed through a holistic whole of government and whole of society approach. During oversight visit, we have seen time and time again the devastating impact of alcohol and mushrooming of taverns on crime in all our communities. These are the concerns that must be addressed by local municipalities through the enforcement of bylaws and ensuring that taverns keep their approved business hours. We call on local municipalities not to lose sight on the impact of alcohol and of crime in ensuring that licenses and of small residents are being taken care of. Honorable Chairperson, much has been said about the motivations behind farm attacks, but there is absolute no evidence that support claims that farm attacks are perpetrated by organized crime syndicates. Achtbare voorsitter, daar is geen etniese suiwering of wit volkswoord nie. Plasaanvalle is nie rasgedrewe nie. Vir elke verskillende plasaanval kan ek 10 ander ewe gruwelik en erger voorbeelde van brutaliteit en wêreld gee. Bewering van wit volksmoord is onverantwoordelikheid en die Vryheidsfront en die DA en die ACDP moet dit stop. Honorable Chairperson, as our President stated previously, race relations in farming communities are not harmonious, far from it. We need to build this relationship and establish social cohesion in all of our communities. This is the only way to move forward from our painful past and reclaim our future. Honorable Chair, during the July 2021 unrest, police officer was locked in the boot of his car after he followed polluters. His car was set alight and he was burned alive. May his soul rest in peace. This is a horrific act. We have not called for an ad hoc committee in the face of this horrific crime because we understand that the police will do their work to arrest the perpetrators of the crime, and Parliament through its committee will play an oversight role to ensure that the law enforcement agencies deals with such challenges. We are building a non-racial society, and we will always be concerned when race is subtly used as a political tool for mobilization of support for political gains. We should not see crime through the lens of race. Instead, we are concerned about the loss of lives of 14 farmers and farm workers murdered between April and June. The 31 police members who were slaughtered mercilessly for executing their constitutional mandate, and all murders that occurred in our country. In conclusion, Chairperson, to the DA, and no commission will be established. We will never consider or entertain the DA Federal Council resolution. In that position, Chairperson, let the ANC, we are saying we are rejecting this motion. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind members that we said these mics are very sensitive. So anybody who does anything is actually violating what the warning I gave. The next speaker is Honorable Sheikh Imam from NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. And allow me to thank Honorable Groenewald for the motion that he has tabled here today. And yes, indeed, I heard one of my colleagues, particularly from the EFF, talk about kill the Boer chant song. Very importantly, and I must agree with you, killing is a criminal activity. But also singing the song, Kill the Boer, is a criminal activity because you're enticing and encouraging others to take the life of innocent people. I must again agree with Honorable Groenewald that indeed that farmers and farm workers play in the pivotal role in the economic growth of this country. 880,000 direct and indirect jobs are created in this country. More importantly, I think we need to understand that that leads to about 3.5 million, as Honorable Groenewald alluded to, that are basically directly or indirectly benefiting from farming activities. Let us not forget that if it is not for the farming, the food products in South Africa, we will be food insecure. Now let's come to the issue of crime, particularly in the farming community. There is no substantive evidence to confirm that indeed there's an orchestrated attempt to remove farmers or kill farmers particularly, and perhaps that's something we need to look at in the future. Our understanding as the National Freedom Party is, as a result of the remote areas and ruralness of the farming community, they are vulnerable to attacks by criminals. What we cannot run away from is that South Africa is currently in a state of lawlessness. And every political party in this House, excepting the National Freedom Party, often undermines the role of the police officers, the lives that they put at risk. In fact, we look for the slightest opportunity to attack them. An ideal example is what happened in Kensington the other day when they confronted a drug dealer and the community wanted to protect the drug dealer and the police attempted to take him away through the vehicle, of course, and that is making headlines all over. But the criminal activity, the drugs and the number of people affected is not being attended to address. What we really need in South Africa is a holistic approach to the high levels of crime. Police officers don't cause these crimes. They are not the reason why the crime rate is so high, but they are expected to deal with all the failures of every other respective department and politicians at large. That is what we should be dealing with. If we don't deal with through a holistic approach of what are the root causes of crime, we're going to continue with our people dying. And I agree, the death of one farmer is one too many. The death of any citizen in South Africa is one.
Honorable Member.
We don't believe the ad hoc committee is going to solve the problem, but a holistic approach to deal with this problem with crime once and for all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. The next speaker is from the AIC, Honorable Jafta. AIC. Then we move to the next one, COPE. COPE. The next speaker would be from the PAC. PAC. The next speaker would be from Al-Jama. Al-Jama. The next speaker would be from DA, Honorable Golding.
Thank you, House Chair. The ongoing scourge of farm attacks and murders is a blight on our nation and a direct threat to food security in our country. While our fiscus is currently under pressure and the Treasury and Cabinet are scrambling to tighten belts, the economic impact of farm attacks and murders due to the dearth of rural safety accounts for tens of billions of rands in economic impact and lost food production. The latest crime stats indicate a dramatic increase of 56% in farm murders over the preceding quarter. Is it not time that we take concrete steps to protect and safeguard those who feed us? But what can be done, you may ask? The SAPs have published the National Rural Safety Strategy, which claims to plan to improve policing, build capacity, increase integration and cooperation in rural areas. However, this occurs against the backdrop of rural precincts which cover large geographical areas, which is often extremely isolated with long distances which need to be traveled. Under-resourced rural stations and stock theft units, both in terms of manpower, equipment, and physical infrastructure. A lack of skilled personnel in these rural precincts, as these areas often need specialist knowledge, skills, and training. A shortage of adequate vehicles, mounted units, canine resources, a deficient radio network, a lack of dedicated rural safety coordinators, ineffective evidence and case docket management, inefficient coordination and integration with rural safety volunteer structures. The absence of border control coupled with dilapidated border fences and roads in these rural areas, which hampers operational enforcement and facilitates stock theft. Add to this an ineffective criminal justice system, regular theft of critical infrastructure, topped off with frequent bouts of load shedding, which puts both farming operations and safety at serious risk. This is truly a recipe for disaster. I think it's time we pay this matter a bit more attention. Actions speak louder than plans. What should be done, you may ask? Well, we need to show our willingness to address this matter. Farm matters need to be categorized as a priority crime. These attacks are very similar to house robbery, business robbery, and car hijacking, all of which are priority crimes. And as such, SAPS has set up and capacitated specialist task teams to investigate and resolve these crimes. Must provide a focus on SAP's national resource and training plans to capacitate rural stations and to provide boots on the ground. Furthermore, we must reintroduce specialized units dedicated to the protecting of our rural areas. As previously promised by the Minister of Police, this has proven highly effective in DA-run municipalities in the Western Cape, such as Overstrand, Swartland, Mossel Bay, and the city of Cape Town, where localized rural safety units have recorded marked successes in preventing crime and reducing rural crime. We must strengthen and capacitate volunteer members, structures, and organizations such as farm watchers, which have access to far more human resources and capital than SAPS currently does. These members have the willingness and often local expertise, which is of great value in these rural areas in the fight against crime. We must increase the investigative capacity at these rural stations to ensure thorough and timely apprehension and the reduction of case backlogs. We must increase the crime intelligence capacity in these rural areas to focus on prevention rather than after the fact responding to murders and attacks which have occurred. We must increase the monitoring of case flow pertaining to farm attacks. This has been demonstrated by the DA via its Watching Brief program to ensure that cases are driven to completion. And Zimbabwe was once known as the breadbasket of Africa. Today, due to the murder, persecution, and subsequent flight of its farmers, it is now a net importer of food. Its economy is in shambles. We must choose a different path. To accomplish this, DA supports this resolution. I thank you.
Very much. The next speaker would be from the ANC, Honorable Mandela. Honorable Mandela. it looks like it's not in. Can we then call Honorable Groenewald from FF Plus?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So let me start with the Deputy Minister referring to Mahatma Gandhi's crime affects all. It's true. But why then did the police prioritize cash in transit heists? And the results are quite clear. About a week or two ago, the police have killed 19 criminals. That is the difference. And the Honorable Deputy Minister says that figures do not lie. I can say to the Honorable Deputy Minister, they do lie because they don't give the perspective. And if you want to have a clear perspective, then you must understand to compare apples with apples. If we do that, you will get a different picture. I want to say it very clearly. It is the farming community that developed, upholding the economy, and is the heartbeat of rural economy and building of infrastructure in rural areas. If we kill our farmers, we kill our rural areas. Ek wil graag vir die agbare Peacock sê, sy verwys na 0,2% van die moorde. Agbare lid, jy is op die polisiekomitee, jy moet bietjie oples in die klas. As jy wil appels met appels vergelyk, dan sien ons dat jy dit per 100,000 van die bevolking moet vergelyk. Plaasmoorde, as jy dit vergelyk per 100,000 van die bevolking, is die verhouding 1 tot meer as 100. Suid-Afrika se totale moordsyfer is 1 tot 37 van die bevolking van 100,000. En dit is die groot verskil. En daarom wil ek vir julle sê, hierdie komitee, and it puts it very clearly, to investigate the effective of safety measures to our farms. If we reject this committee, it is again the ANC government who does not want to be held responsible and is not transparent when it comes to crime. Everything that the ANC see is through a perspective of race. That makes the ANC nothing else than a racist political party. I thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the debate. We shall now proceed to the last item on the order paper, which is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable N L S Kwankwa on the benefits of a policy approach that is focused on the informal economy to address inequality, poverty, and unemployment in South Africa. Can I call on Honorable Kwankwa?
Chairperson, thank you very much. I hope it's okay that I keep my mic, my video closed because I have poor connectivity. I'm in the middle of load shedding.
No, that's accepted.
Thank you, sir. According to the International Labour Organization, about 2 billion workers, or 60% of the world's employed population of the ages between 15 and older, spend at least part of their time in the informal sector. Today, the informal sector still accounts for about a third of low and middle income countries' economic activities, which means quite a sizable chunk of our economy, about a third of the South African economy, is made up of the informal sector, which then provides the reason why this country, and from a policy point of view, we should be focusing on the informal sector as a way of trying to improve the lot, especially of the previously disadvantaged and the poor. Since the advent of democracy, there appears, especially from a policy point of view, that South Africa tends to lag behind other upper middle income countries instead of in terms of investing decisively in the small business sector, which is a core factor behind very low employment levels in those jurisdictions. In this country, the informal sector, especially informal businesses from small-scale farmers to waste pickers, street vendors, street marketplace, chisanyamas, the taxi drivers in the Western Cape, if you like, are not entirely recognized as functioning businesses that require or deserve the support and the respect of government for their entrepreneurial activities. You will understand that some of these, although they contribute a lot of money meaningfully to the economy, but they tend to be harassed, for instance, like the taxi drivers, as what was happening between the city of Cape Town and the taxi drivers in the Western Cape. But also you have informal sectors that are not getting enough support, the Chisanyamas in Guguletu, in Nyanga, in Dansane, and many parts of the country, where they're not getting enough support from the Department of Small Business and other sectors of government that should be paying attention to this important sector. While we acknowledge that the department has decided to step out the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Program through an implementation of programs over the medium term, we are concerned that such steps are not adequate to try and address the needs of the informal sector. For an example, the department has set itself a target of about 1,033 micro enterprises that it wants to support over a period of a year, which is 12 months. But if you were to divide 133 small and micro enterprises that are going to be supported, it means that per month, that is a paltry 111 entities that are going to be supported in South Africa by the small business sector. And per province, it's a small number of 13 businesses which are going to be supported, while most of the entities require support because most of the people, especially those who are not economically active or rather were not part of the formal sector of the economy, find themselves working in those sectors. In this regard, we are saying that due to underfunding of the small business development department, there has been a lack or inability of the department to fulfill its mandate to lead an integrated approach that will ensure the promotion and development of entrepreneurship, small and micro and medium enterprises and cooperatives, which you normally find in peri-urban areas, rural townships, and rural areas. And to also ensure that there's a development of an enabling legislative and policy framework that supports the growth of informal businesses and its sustainability. Hence, the country is faced with the levels of inequality and poverty and the enormous rate of unemployment that we're struggling with. One of the issues that we should be working towards is, as a country, we should be addressing issues of market concentration in certain sectors as a way of allowing small businesses, especially those who are operating in the informal sector, to enter into markets that ordinarily they would not have either the resources or the capital required for them to be able to formalize and to operate optimally. The other issue which we have proposed many times in the past is that the informal economy is not booming because they lack financial support. It is not booming because they lack financial support. Therefore, government should actually creatively offer them business credit. This can be done through using the Grameen Bank model, for example, office, which we have just changed into a bank, which will be a bank which will set up in a village with field officer and some qualified bank workers who will understand the market, who will use the communal systems of African existence as a way of extending finance to people in groups, so that then the responsibility for repayment is placed on the group that will actually be accessing finance. Also, the other issue which we have said is that government should have a regulation that create a space for small businesses to enter markets by enforcing formal businesses, including the retailers, for example, to form partnerships with the informal business sectors. We have proposed in the past, and we still continue to propose, that in instances where malls are built in the townships, it's important that the anchor tenants and other well-established businesses, the corporates, are encouraged to make sure that they provide the necessary support for informal businesses that operate in that area, where arrangements can be entered into where there are given spaces which are at reasonable prices, where they can be able to operate businesses in centers that ordinarily they would not be able to access without rent or rent.
Members, the time is up. The next speaker is from the ANC, Next speaker from the ANC. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Good afternoon to all the honorable members of Parliament and the other guests that have joined us online. I would like to thank Honorable Kwankwa for the contribution they've made and further talk to the work that government is doing to address some of the concerns that have been raised. Honorable members, it is the common fact that apartheid left South Africa with deep fractures along the lines of class, race, gender, and place of residence. The former Bantustans and townships were deliberately underdeveloped and livelihoods opportunities actively undermined so that Black South Africans will be forced to cheaply sell their labor on the mines, so farms and factories. This resulted in townships and the former Bantustans becoming dormitory economies, marginally located and dependent on remittances, and with only 10% of the economically active populations earning income from wage labor. As the ANC government, we have tackled the extreme poverty we found through a comprehensive system of social protection. The quality of life of citizens living in these areas has steadily improved, a fact confirmed by the UNDP's Human Development Index. But the scars of apartheid haven't gone away. South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries worldwide. Unemployment is far too high, especially in the townships and marginalized rural areas. This is why we prioritize economic transformation with SMMEs, cooperatives, including in the informal sector, to drive growth and job creation. Honorable Chairperson, it is generally recognized that South Africa has a different labor market structure to other upper middle income and developing economies. Less than 10% of our economically active population is self-employed, compared to between 25% and 40% on average that are working for themselves. We are looking at that and trying to make sure that we bridge that gap. If I were to take you down in terms of the specifics of the introductions that we've made, if you look at the stats essay, it tells you that SMMEs in 2013 contributed 25% to business turnover. By 2021, this had increased to 33% of the South Africa's 10.6 trillion rands. If we break this down to sectors, honorable members, in 2013, SMMEs made up just 39% of business turnover in construction. By 2021, this had increased to 63%. This is a direct result of our fight against anti-competitive practices in the sector and the public procurement policies that we are implementing. In the manufacturing space, SMMEs, both formal and informal, contributed just 18% of turnover in 2013. By 2021, this had increased to 27%. This is because of our enterprise supplier development initiatives, our small manufacturing support programs, and working with corporates to open supply chains. The 2022 Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report shows that our early-stage entrepreneurial activity is also on the up. By 2001, we had just over 1 million early-stage entrepreneurs. By 2021, this had increased to just over 4 million, an increase of 274%. These are facts which show that South Africans are becoming more entrepreneurial, and SMMEs, both informal and formal, are making an increased contribution to our economy. So there can be no false narratives about the ANC government not supporting both the formal and informal sectors, but much more can be done, which is why we have taken an ecosystem approach with our NISED strategy, where we are mobilizing all resources across society to support both formal and informal sectors. Honorable members, we are clear that the informal sector must be supported for two reasons. One, the sector provides jobs and livelihoods to the most vulnerable individuals in our society, including the urban poor, female heads of households, disabled people, and rural-based families. We remain unapologetically pro-poor, and our policies are as aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Secondly, the informal sector is the nursery of entrepreneurship. Many of our top entrepreneurs started out hustling on the dusty streets of some townships. We must be doing more to create growth pathways for these informal entrepreneurs. The informal sector is called the hidden economy for a reason, and reliable statistics are hard to be found. Every few years, Stats SA conducts a survey. We're currently waiting the results of the recent survey, which will also give an indication as to how COVID-19 impacted the informal sector. Just over half of all informal businesses are in the trade sector, with more than 1 million people working in the informal retail. A disproportionately high number of these are women. And according to the African Food Security Urban Network, this informal retail sector, made up of street and spaza traders, corner grocers, and street takeaways, is a key source of food for poor households in general and food insecure households in particular. Some 2/3 of informal businesses made more than 750 rands per month. But there is gender bias we must tackle. Only 32% of this women earn more than 1,500 per month, compared to 53% of men. Honorable Chairperson, we find it ironic that the DA speaks a lot about red tape. As Honorable Kwankwa mentioned, Cape Town has become the main city where informal traders and more recently transport SMMEs are actively harassed, goods and assets confiscated and impounded, and small businesses are closed. I would like to call the chairperson of the Cape Peninsula Informal Traders Forum, Mayor Rosheda Mula, who says, and I quote, "Under the guise by law enforcement, the City of Cape Town administration harasses, intimidates, and diminishes the income of hardworking, honest, and vulnerable traders who seek nothing more than to earn a legitimate income," and I close quote. Chairperson, we are alive to the needs of informal traders, and within our limited resources envelope, are making critical interventions. Honorable Kwankwa has made reference to the underfunding of the department, but we are not folding arms. We have an ecosystem that we've built in place, which seeks to bring all the stakeholders that are involved in the ecosystem to provide for both financial and non-financial support. We've looked at the
Point of
challenges
order,
of
Chair.
infrastructure.
There's some disruption.
Yes.
What is the point of order?
No, I wanted you to correct that disruption, please.
Please, honorable members, let's respect the speaker on the floor. Thank you very much. Continue, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. We are responding directly to the problem of inadequate infrastructure for micro businesses and traders. We've since established a number of facilities that are shared facilities, and in this financial year, as committed, we'll be establishing 7 more, and this is meant to accommodate and reduce the burden of rentals to the micro traders that we have. We are implementing the informal and micro enterprise development program that Honorable Kwankwa made reference to. This year, we've set aside 20 million rands. We continue to engage with the big corporates to contribute to it as part of the ESD programs. We've established the Township and Rural Enterprise Program, which provides a step-up platform for informal businesses in the township and rural areas. We have partnered with the wholesale and retail sector in providing training and stock that must be given to spaza shops and general dealers in order to reclaim that economy, both in our local areas in terms of villages and townships. We are providing support to the microfinance program that is rendered through CIFA, and we have disbursed about 3.2 billion rands as things stand. And this year we are targeting 90,000 microfinance companies that must benefit. Looking at the legislative element in terms of the policy, we have as government the National Informal Business Upliftment Strategy, which provides policy interventions that addresses social exclusion and interventions for individuals and firms to operate informally. Additionally, there's 2 new policies that we've put in place. One that looks at tackling the credit gap. It talks to the SMME and cooperatives funding, both formal and informal. The funding policy will be dealing with those, and the one that has been released by National Treasury on financial inclusion. Again, this is meant to ensure that we're able to provide interventions that will de-risk and enable micro enterprises, both formal and informal. We are addressing red tapes. As a result, we have brought 1 legislation as things stand to Parliament. We are in a process of bringing a second one. The other one seeks to establish unfair practices that are in place and deal with them on informal enterprises and formal enterprises. The Businesses Act seeks to deal with the inadequate licensing processes in terms of the fees that are charged by the different municipalities and the different frameworks that are provided, and therefore give an opportunity for the minister to intervene when needs arise. We are also establishing intergovernmental structures on business regulation and business licensing in order to help municipalities improve on the local economic development strategies that will address the gap that Honorable Kwankwa is talking about, often ensuring that we can dedicate a particular number of procurement, including directing our spatial planning, and whoever that comes and invests must follow the LED strategy as approved by the municipality. There is still much more to do, but we remain unwavering in our commitment. And I quote directly from the ANC's 55th National Conference resolution, to build an economy which is inclusive and in which new businesses are able to emerge and flourish, where Black people, women and young South Africans are able to advance at all levels and all areas of the economy, and where township and rural economies are able to grow. Working together, honorable members, we believe that we can turn the tide around. And of course, we call upon all the honorable members that are seated here and their friends and families to make sure that we continue to support informal traders. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. We did not recognize you well when you started. We now recognize. Can we move to the next speaker from the DA, Honorable Kruger?
Thank you, House Chair. Unfortunately, I'm also hit with the electricity outages, so I will rather keep my camera off, if it's okay with you.
Okay, it's okay.
All right. Hierdie toespraak is vir al ons oumas wat hulle goedere op die straat verkoop om 'n lewe te maak en hulle families te onderhou. Salute. Chairperson, if you listen to the minister, it's no wonder that informal businesses call the ANC the world party. South Africa's informal economy is characterized by traders such as spaza shops, sidewalk hawkers, and in public places. The very nature of informal business activity makes it difficult to quantify the size of the sector. However, it's clear that the micro-entrepreneurs make a noteworthy contribution to our economy. The sector appears to be growing despite very little support from the ANC government. They grow because of tenacity of the entrepreneurs who are brave enough to work every day in a very hostile environment to find ways to support themselves and their families. The Labour Advisory Company... Chair?
I'm not sure who is speaking, but can we be helped?
Please just check my time, please.
We are warning the speaker, please don't disrupt. Continue, Honorable Kruger.
The Labour Advisory Company, ADCOP, puts the economic contribution of the informal economy at 17.3% of GDP and estimates that more than 6.2 million people are employed in this sector. The ease of doing business with this sector has not been a priority for the ANC government, and businesses in the informal economy continue to face severe growth inhibitors. These range from, but are not limited to, a lack of information on opportunities for funding to a lack of support infrastructure, including sanitation and transport services. Munisipaliteite is die doring in die vlees vir hierdie klein sake. Amptenare gee nie 'n flenter om nie. Hulle laat entrepreneurs in die duister aangaande die registrasie van permitte, die rompslomp verwant aan die invul van vorms, en in die meeste gevalle kan die entrepreneur dit nie bekostig om na die naaste munisipaliteit te reis nie. Plaaslike verorderings diskrimineer teen die informele besigheidssektor deur die afwesigheid van standaard tariewe. Daar word ook geen voorsiening gemaak vir die sogenaamde oorlewingshandelaars nie. Hulle stoei en kreën om kop bo water te hou, sonder dat die regering 'n vinger verroer om hulle te help. Nie eers 'n bliep op die ANC se radarskerms nie. Klein sakebedrywighede word van bakboord na stuurboord verskuif en entrepreneurs het geen sekerheid van hulle staanplek waar handel gedryf moet word. As gevolg van plaaslike regering wat faal om vir hierdie besighede spasie te skep nader aan hul mark, word die gereg soms in eie hande geneem en word handel in elke denkbare plekkie of hoekie bedryf. Die skit van goedere van informele handelaars is 'n onding en die boetes gepaard met die aksies van die munisipaliteite is gewoonlik die laaste spyker in die doodskus van hierdie handelaars. Die regering moet ophou baas en klaas speel en eerder met die plaaslike burgery praat om oplossings te vind vir hierdie dapper handelaars. Internasionale sukses is immers 'n bewys dat wanneer daar 'n totale gemeenskapsstrategie gevolg word, kan dit tot voordeel van almal strek. Improving the ease of doing business for the informal sector in South Africa is not only a matter of economic importance, but also a matter of social justice. These businesses are the backbone of many communities, providing employment and economic opportunities to the marginalized and the vulnerable. To unlock their full potential, we must address the barriers they face. By fostering an environment that supports and empowers informal businesses, we can promote inclusive economic growth, reduce poverty, and build a more resilient economy for all South Africans. It's our collective responsibility to ensure that informal sector is no longer marginalized. South Africa requires a comprehensive approach to address the needs of informal traders. The implementation of policies must benefit those who play vital roles in the informal economy. Government must recognize the informal sector and implement policies that enable its growth. South Africa can harness the potential of these businesses to drive economic development, reduce poverty, and create a more inclusive and resilient economy for all the citizens. Together, we can create a South Africa where doing business in the informal sector is not just easier, but also a pathway to a bigger future for social protection for all. In less than 9 months, the multi-party charter will take over the South African government. It will rescue the entire small business sector, including the grannies that sell apples on the sidewalk. Under a transparent, honest, and caring government, the true positive change for informal business will be there for anyone to see. But for this to happen, the citizens of this beautiful country need to ensure that they are registered to vote in the next year's election. So I urge you to visit check.da.org.za to ensure that you are registered to vote, and together let's get the informal sector back on track. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is from the EFF. EFF.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Let's get this right here. House Chairperson, let's contextualize what is meant by a policy approach focused on the informal economy to address inequality, poverty, and unemployment. Over 11 million people are actively seeking employment daily, but cannot find work. Some have even given up. This accounts for 42.1% of the labor force, individuals who by age qualify to participate in the economy and offer their labor in exchange for income. More than 61.1% of the population of South Africa lives below the upper middle income threshold of $6.85 as of today. That amounts to about 130 rand a day. A majority of our people survive on less than 130 rand a day. I know some animals in Hyde Park and Sandton that live a much more lavish lifestyle than most people. Moreover, we are discussing a country with a Gini index of 63, which measures the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Just to put matters into perspective, a Gini index of 0 represents perfect equality, whilst a score closer to 100 signifies extreme inequality. At 63, South Africa is now confirmed that it has the highest inequality levels in the world. This sixth administration is failing the country. Chairperson, additionally, racial undertones characterizes inequality. The beneficiaries of apartheid, predominantly Caucasians, continue to reap its benefit, while the majority of Africans in the main remain relegated to apartheid-designed squatter camps, facing long commutes and poor wages. You earn, but you remain poor. People live from hand to mouth if they live at all. Proposing that these challenges can be addressed solely through a policy focus on the informal sector is both misguided and an indictment of the governing party. Many find themselves in the informal economy due to circumstances beyond their control, not by choice. Individuals aren't selling toys in the busy intersections for the fun of it. It's about our mothers, it's about our survival, it's about making sure that people put bread on the table. Our mothers don't wake up at 3 a.m. to face the harassment by Metro Police while selling vegetables on the CBD's street by choice. It's essential to distinguish between the informal economy and small business and small businesses. The informal economy in South Africa differs from those in other developed or developing countries. While South Africa terms informal economy often lacks a technical skills or capital foundation. The crux of the issue, Chairperson, lies in land ownership patterns, a discussion that people don't want to enter into. We must expropriate all land, placing all lands under the custody of the state for equitable redistribution. Nationalizing strategic economic sectors, especially banks and mines, is also a non-negotiable. Building a competent state and government capacity is crucial, paving the way for the abolishment of these corrupt tenders, while we form the foundation for localizing and industrializing South Africa. Our people deserve our people deserve access to free quality education, healthcare, housing, and sanitation. People need flushed toilets. We must champion a robust industrialization program to create jobs, to give our people dignified jobs. We cannot continue to be an assembly center of the world. We must have our own industries in this country. This approach should form the foundation for transitioning those in the informal sector to formalized small and medium-sized enterprises. Regulatory streamlining is possible, and we can innovate the banking system tailored for small businesses. Last but one, addressing the staggering unemployment, poverty, and inequality rates cannot be achieved solely within the bounds of the informal sector. It's going to fail if we think it that way. We, in the Economic Freedom Front, freedom fighters, will demonstrate this when we take over from the governing party in 2024. 2024 is a year of the EFF. The EFF will rule this country and show the masses of these people.
You are dreaming. You are just dreaming.
Chairperson, can you call these ANC people to order? They are failing to run the country. They can't even conduct themselves with dignity on such a platform.
I've just done that. I've just called them to order. Continue.
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable members, please allow him to conclude his...
Let me conclude by saying we've got very good positive feedback as the EFF that people of this country cannot wait to remove the ANC and replace it with the EFF. Everyone, young and old, are looking for the EFF government to take over. We can't wait to install the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, at the Union Buildings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next speaker would be from the IFP. The next speaker would be from FF Plus, Honorable Groenewald.
Thank you, Chair. We should be honest with each other. Currently, government is restricting the informal sector and not enabling it. The informal economy is an untapped sector and has the potential to alleviate poverty and unemployment. With public transport constituting about 10% of consumer budget owing to fuel price hikes, there is a growing trend towards localization of spend. This favors the vendors in the informal sector. But even though the sector is a significant component of the economy, with more than 2.5 million people employed in the sector and is contributing about 6% of the GDP, it is underestimated and lacks policy support. If policy approach does not recognize the significant role the informal sector plays, government will fail in any effort to eradicate poverty and unemployment. The ANC government fails to create an enabling environment that supports small businesses. Government's financial support projects fail because of corruption. Structural constraints impede inclusive economic growth. Overregulation, unnecessary red tape, incompetence of government officials, and a lack of basic service delivery hampers small and micro business. Simplification of regulations will foster an environment that is conducive to growth and, by extension, job creation. Proper coordination and consultation between municipalities and informal business operators are also needed. Issues should be prioritized that promote growth and development. This includes basic service delivery and infrastructure development. How can any business operate without access to water and electricity? The failures of the ANC government in these regards hinder small businesses. South Africa needs a government that enables and fosters the informal sector instead of restricting it. Through enabling policies, access to microfinancing, and structural and regulatory reform, the potential of millions of South Africans can be untapped, thereby addressing the pressing issue of inequality, poverty, and unemployment that plagues society. Thank you, Chair.
Much. The next speaker would be from UDM. UDM.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, indeed. I think there's general agreement that the informal sector of the economy is one of the many sectors of the economy where change around policy, the thinking,